conversation was never something that happened in elementary school. And as you grew up, it became more and more constricted. So I figured, well, where do people learn how to communicate? Maybe junior high. So I thought that, and then of course, junior high was even worse, and then high school. And I learned how to do it in the community, but I did, but the school itself wasn't a way. So I dropped out of school. I told my parents that, and my mom's like, well, that's fine, but we have to get you a job. She's a mom. That's what she does. So we got an application for a job at a local state mental health facility for adolescent boys. Being well adjusted to a world in a crazy place is no sign of being mentally healthy. And so I really am still, just maybe more than ever, a proponent of bringing forth that one thing that I know does heal people, and that is through conversation, through communication, through creativity, through all of the forms of two people. And that's what humans are really after together. That's what we are as social constructs.
Welcome to the Unfiltered Minds Podcast, the only culturally diverse podcast where we discuss ways to destigmatize mental health, as well as promote self-seeking behaviors amongst our youth and family members struggling with ADHD or depression. Now, here's your host, Jane Levy.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Unfiltered Mind Podcast. This is the platform where we discuss ways to destigmatize mental health, as well as promote self-help seeking behaviors amongst our youth and their family members. I am super excited to introduce our guest speaker for today, Dr. Moss. Dr. Moss is a mental health advocate, a psychiatrist, MD, serving in many capacities. Dr. Moss is also a keynote speaker, a podcaster himself on The Voice Podcasting, and he is a holistic transformation coach. Welcome, Dr. Moss. It's a pleasure to have you on. Please feel free to introduce yourself.
Right. Yeah. So it's great to be here. Thank you so much. I go by Dr. Fred, even more so than Dr. Moss these days.
Okay.
And so it's a little bit more affectionate, a little bit more down home, a little bit more like humanly connected than Dr. Moss. Dr. Moss, I associate him with a white jacket and the stethoscope and all the things that I was for so many years. But these days I've gone through lots of transformations, and I'm really about to be in Dr. Fred, which is a lot more, what's the word? Like intimate, a lot more just present and down to earth. And that's really what's here for me now. Familiar.
I like that. Dr. Fred, so your desire is to help people be real and be heard as well. What's the driving force behind that?
Yeah, so this goes back really ever since I arrived here on Earth, to be honest. And don't worry, it won't be too long a story. But on the day that I was born to a family that was in a fair amount of chaos and disarray. I had a couple of older brothers, 10 and 14 years older than me, and then my parents. And, from what I understand, I was called on to bring joy and happiness and peace and connection to that family. So ever since I arrived, that's what I was doing. I was a rolling bundle of joy at the time. I'm not sure they would call me that now, but I was that at the time. And I became really enchanted with the whole idea of communication. I used to watch these adults talk to each other and think that I can't wait until someday I might be able to do that. And I thought that was going to happen in school. But I learned pretty quickly that in kindergarten, where I was already pretty precocious, I knew how to add and subtract, and I knew a little bit about reading, and I knew a little bit about a lot of things because of my two brothers. Those kids, they just wanted to throw blocks and take afternoon naps, which, I also wanted to do, but I wanted to read the next chapter of Henry Huggins as well. But what I really knew is that is that I wasn't going to learn how to communicate in school. I learned that in the first and second grade when every time I spoke up, I was told to be quiet and sit in my chair and just listen. So conversation was never something that happened in elementary school. And as you grew up, it became more and more constricted. So I figured, well, where do people learn how to communicate? Maybe junior high. So I thought and then of course, junior high was even worse. And then high school was worse than junior high. So I decided it must be in college where the big kids are, like University of Michigan is where I went to college. And really expected that I would learn how to actually speak out loud. There were protests going on, and I was pretty sure. But the classrooms wasn't where the protests were, and the classrooms didn't teach how to communicate again. So I again became very, 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 very obsessed almost with this idea of connecting with other humans through voice and through conversation. And I learned how to do it in the community, but I did, but the school itself wasn't a way. So I dropped out of school and I came out to California to find myself, which I did in Berkeley, California, but it wasn't sustainable. I went back to Michigan one more time for this new industry that I had heard about that was going to take the world by storm called computers. Maybe you had heard about it. And the idea is that computers, there was only one computer in all of the state of Michigan, and that was at the University of Michigan. And so I was doing punch cards and batch jobs, and that wasn't going to work either. So I dropped out one more time. And when I dropped out, I said I would never go back to school again. I told my parents that, and my mom's like, well, that's fine, but we have to get you a job. She's a mom, that's what she does. So we got an application for a job at a local state mental health facility for adolescent boys. And there I truly began to communicate. That was when my real career in mental health began, was in 1980 with those kids. We'll call them kids, 7 years younger than me. In that healing process where we were really just exchanging energies with each other, and I was seeing them for what they were, which was just people, and they were seeing me for the same, we began a real process of communication and connection, which is simply at the heart of all healing. And I knew that for sure. But I didn't like the way psychiatry was treating these kids. And I decided I wanted to go into psychiatry one more time because I didn't like it the way it was going. And I thought I would bring communication to that field. But the field has stretched over time to become even much less related to communication than it was on that day, because Prozac was introduced while I was in training. And since then, everything has flipped into this biological psychiatry chemical imbalance model. And for the rest of my career, as we could say, I'm a glorified child care worker, but what I really am is a psychiatrist who's been working very hard to interject communication into the middle of what mental health is about. And I've been doing so sort of against the grain, because all the while that I've been a doctor, I've been typecast to learn how to diagnose people and to write prescriptions for people, even though these medicines don't work. Now, for your listeners who have found a medicine that they think works, I'm not telling them that they should stop their medicine. If you find something in your life that works, you should keep doing it. But there's 100 million people, hundreds of millions of people who don't feel that way about their psychiatric treatment, who feel misheard, misdiagnosed, not listened to, not understood, not cared for, undercared for, etc. And I am speaking to them. The idea is that the way the psychiatric industry is built is not a way to actually procure health. It's not a way to promote health. It often actually causes or increases or even advances the actual symptoms it's marketed to treat. And it does through diagnosing and through the medication, which at times reliably increases the symptoms that it's marketed to treat. So over time, I've been kind of running this dual street as a psychiatrist, really wanting to interject communication and connection as the source of all healing, and still doing what the public or what the industry wants me to do, which in most cases is simply to diagnose and medicate. And I've become more and more fired up about this. In 2006, I began to take some of my clients off of their medicines, and lo and behold, they got way better. And they got reliably better. Sometimes, like, their diagnosis actually disappeared. Then I began a long run of years where I was doing psychiatry all over the country as a locum tenens, as a temporary doctor. And in 2016, I really started doing something a little bit new, where I introduced Welcome to Humanity and then Find Your True Voice. I wrote the book in 2019. And I also wrote that book in 2021. The other book I wrote was The Creative 8, Healing Through Creativity and Self-Expression, which really gives people an opportunity to heal themselves without ever having to go to a psychiatrist, without ever having to come through the mental health system. Actually getting that people are simply people responding to a world that is pretty crazy and pretty unstable. It's pretty easy to get depressed in this world. It's okay. It's pretty easy to be afraid. It's pretty easy to be anxious. It's pretty easy to be scattered. It's pretty easy to have trouble in social settings. It's even pretty easy to think that people are watching you. It's all very, very easy because the world is a crazy place. And, you know, being well adjusted to a world in a crazy place is no sign of being mentally healthy. And so I really am still just maybe more than ever a proponent of bringing forth that one thing that I know does heal people, and that is through conversation, through communication, through creativity, through all of the forms of two people or more being together. Human connection is at the source of all healing, of all conditions of all types, psychiatric and beyond. But for the sake of this conversation, let's keep it into the mental health world. Psychiatrically or psychologically, what helps people more than anything is being heard for who they are and really being understood for what they're saying or what they represent. Because when you know that when people sometimes get you, there's a new sense of comfort, a new sense of groundedness that takes place. And that's what humans are really after together. That's what we are as social constructs. And I'm really just a huge proponent of that. That's what my course is about. That's what my podcasts are about. That's what my books are about. And that's what I'm about.
Thank you for that detailed explanation. Dr. Fred, you did mention about Welcome to Humanity. What is that? Is that a book?
Welcome to Humanity is my website and the overarching umbrella brand. Welcome
Okay.
to Humanity is just the idea that each and every experience that we have as humans is part of the potpourri, even if it's totally unpleasant, even if it's totally like difficult, even if it causes pain. Each and every experience we have is part of the smorgasbord known as humanity and gives us an opportunity to either be tested or to enjoy. At times, ecstasy and miracles and beauty and truth and loveliness and, gorgeousness is one side of it all. And then on the far end, there's other side, which is, treachery and barbarism and heinousness and almost unacceptable or unspeakable things that we see or learn about humanity. And all of those things are part of this big trek that we're going through called the human experience. And that's what Welcome Humanity represents.
So fabulous. Dr. Moss, I am going to read you some statistics. 1 in 6 young people have experienced a major depression episode in the United States, according to a recent study that was done in 2022. 9.2% of Americans aged 12 and older report experiencing symptoms of depression. The rates are getting higher in adolescents, young adults, coming in at 16.9% and 17.2% respectively. Suicide rate is a leading cause of death in the United States. In fact, it's the second leading cause of death among ages 10 to 24, which brings us to this myth, right? People say mental health issue can't affect me. Let's talk about that. Are we exempt? Is anyone exempt from mental health issue?
Well, I appreciate these statistics, but what I want you to get is that being depressed in a world that's depressing does not mean the person is abnormal. That's the key point here. Even if you're really depressed, it does not mean that you're abnormal. It means that you're responding to whatever your world is that's serving you up and that has you being depressed. Being sad about very sad things does not mean that you're abnormal. And there are plenty of things going on in the world that we can point to and identify that actually have us, the rightful answer is for us to be sad. We treat it like it's major depression is a condition, is like an illness, is an abnormality, is something that happens to us. When in fact it isn't. It's the way that we are, it's the way that humans are, and we all can relate. Many of us who are acting like we are undepressed really can be easily convinced to be depressed. I know that if you ask me to come up with a reason to be depressed, like right now, I can do that in an instant. And in fact, I can have loads of answers on how and why I should be depressed right this very second. My guess is that you can too. And so being depressed in a world that is depressing doesn't mean that the person who is depressed has a problem or has an ailment. It's very important to get that, because once we start diagnosing people with like major depression, that's when they think there's something wrong with them for being depressed. And that's when they seek medication, which actually causes depression and causes plenty of other what they call side effects that can create even more problems than any kind of help that they provide. If people knew that there was nothing wrong with them, then they would also know that there's no medications they need to take to alter who they are. It's okay to be depressed in many ways, even to be significantly depressed. What these people probably need more than anything is to have somebody or a group of people actually understand and relate to their experience by connecting and communicating with them and getting who they really are. Resonating harmonically with each other's soul is where the real healing takes place, much more so than any of the medications that are provided by the psychiatric industry.
I agree, because if you look at the black box antidepressant medication, it has the black box label there. It says those medication can the side effect can lead to suicidal thoughts, right?
Yeah, easily. Yeah.
So how do you even expect a parent to even be comfortable even giving that medication to their kid?
Yeah, and they shouldn't. In most cases, I don't think any parent should. If they really thought about it, they wouldn't do it. What's really interesting, Jane, is that people are even more uncomfortable stopping the medicine. They think it's harder to stop the medicine than it is to start. People are eager to start these medicines, hoping that there's a magic bullet or something inside of them. But once I start talking to people about stopping them, that's when they get all nervous and weird about it, as if that's as if continuing the medicine is safer than stopping the medicine, when in fact, even if the medicine is making them worse, they're very, very, very hesitant to actually stop the medicine. It's something that's been taught to us by the industry. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Certainly if we found out we were taking rat poison every single morning instead of something good, we would want to stop it, and we would want to stop it immediately. And, because we would know it was damaging us. But it's very hard to convince some people that stopping medicine is a much better idea than continuing a medicine that would make them worse.
Agree. So, at some point in life, everyone is going to experience some lows, some highs, and
At some point every day, not in life, every single day.
every single day. Yeah. So, what are some of those factors that you actually seen in your practice that actually leading to those depressed episodes?
Well, there's lots of things going on. There's lots of splitting going on, lots of divisiveness. People are losing friends. People are, become sort of violently interested in dismissing people or disconnecting from people, or from throwing people off the island for how they think about something or how they say something or how they look or what they represent or what their parents represent or what the people like them represent. And so there's a whole lot of disconnection that's being promoted by humanity at this time. And as we've talked about a few times already, it's in disconnection that we can create, a whole lot of disharmony. And the idea, when we're forced to disconnect, or when we, in many cases, many of us actually pretend to be someone we're not in order to protect the person that we are. This is a very, very absurd, ludicrous, preposterous way to proceed in life. The idea that we would actually sometimes even say things to other people that even we don't believe, as if it represents us. Some of us do that in order to continue staying in the group, or in order to make sure that we don't get thrown off the island or disrupt the conversation or be misunderstood. We actually say things that are not even aligned with our truest self, and therefore actually represent ourselves as someone different than we are, which is, never going to work. The greatest threat in the world today isn't what we think it is. It's not a virus. It's not racism. It's not climate change. It's not the Supreme Court. It's not the war in Ukraine. It's not who's going to win in the presidency. All those things are massive. It's not even sex trafficking. All those things are very, very massive. But the greatest threat in the world is even bigger than all of those. And that is that we are collectively giving up on our capacity to speak openly to each other. And why do I say that? Because each of the problems that I listed here, if we're going to get on the other side of any of them, is going to require open discourse, the capacity to actually speak with each other respectfully. If we give up on that, we're toast. It's over. Close the lights, put a fork in it. We're done.
So, as a parent that's watching this, children do suffer from depressive episodes. They don't even know how to express it as how we do it as adults. What would you encourage parents to do to just have that open communication in the homes when it comes around mental health topics?
Right. So, the best thing to do is to model open communication. So the best thing to do is take yourself and realize that you too, even as an adult, are not communicating very effectively your actual feelings about things. Maybe you're yelling or becoming threatening or sulking or disappearing or, doing whatever kinds of other divisive or counterproductive things that you do when you're upset. And the opportunity here is to communicate effectively with the other people in your family and represent how effective communication can really work. The key feature of communication that often gets overlooked isn't in what we say or even how we say it. The key feature of communication is about listening. And as long as we listen with the idea that we are curious and we wonder what's really going on there with the other person, we give everyone else an opportunity to speak into their real self. What most parents will find out is if they can hear their children for the pain that they're experiencing without putting them down or pointing at them for being wrong or having some disease called depression, and just listen for the cause, listen for what's really happening in that human over there, and understanding and resonating with that connection, you will see healing take place instantaneously upon receiving that experience. And that's what we're really looking for, is the opportunity to think and be with someone without judging, without evaluating, without assessing, and in fact, just being there to listen and harmonize with whatever anyone else's concerns are. This is no small chore. I am not a pro at this. I'm not saying that it's masterable and we just all can do it. We can all head in that direction, however, and when we fall off and start blaming or start like pointing fingers, we can feel ourselves doing that and then back off of that, apologize for ourselves, and get back on the horse and actually get very curious about what the other person is really trying to communicate.
So wonderful. And you are still practicing, is that correct, Dr.
I'm
Fred?
not practicing regular conventional psychiatry anymore. What I do now is transformational coaching. The reason I'm not practicing psychiatry is psychiatry only wants me to do two things, and that is
Medication.
diagnose and medicate. And frankly, I can't do either of those things with my heart. And so, since I don't do either of those things, because first thing first is I have to do no harm. As a physician, first do no harm. And in truth, I think both of those things are not aligned with doing no harm. So, what I am as a coach is somebody who helps parents and helps children, helps caregivers, and helps the clients actually come in touch with their self, with their truest self, with their core values, with their honest to goodness underlying experience of life. All of my books, the True Voice book, Find Your True Voice, is about getting there. The Creative 8 book, it's about getting there. The course called the True Voice course, of course, is about getting there. That's a great course that uses podcasting as a template and
Mhm.
helps people get to where they've already know they can get to. You don't have to create your true voice. It's underneath all the muck. It's been there since you were a little kid. It's that voice that you represent. There's probably a lot of love in there and a lot of joy and a lot of wonder and a lot of curiosity and a lot of human connection. There's probably a lot of things that you've had as a child that is still here underneath all of that mud. And we get access to that. That's when we start being our own true selves again. And from there is where, as we've already pointed to, that's where healing emanates from.
Are the books, are they available on Audible?
The I do have an Audible version of the Creative 8, which you can find at welcometohumanity.net/creative8. There's an audible version there. It might be at /creative. One of them is the PDF version and one of them is the Audible version. And you can find that on my website, which is drfred360.com. If you look under the books level, you see that there's an Audible version you can click into. The other one, I don't have an Audible version, the Find Your True Voice book. I do have it. I will send it to any of your listeners for free, however, just with shipping and handling. I just got through sending 5 books this afternoon of people who have recently ordered. It's no problem sending the book. I have it here and ready to go. And it would be my honor to send it to people. It's a great book, super fun to read. I've read it recently and forgot that I had written it and really enjoyed it. So I'm really glad that I wrote it. It just points to what we already know about how we can best communicate.
I'm sure people will be reaching out. And we're going to also drop that information in the show notes when we publish the video so the
Beautiful.
viewers and listeners can reach out for that. So a parent comes to you and their child is experiencing passive SI, a suicide ideation. What do you do?
A parent comes to me and they're, what is it?
A child is experiencing, they said a child is experiencing a passive suicide ideation. What do
Okay.
you do?
The child is experiencing suicidal ideation. Is that what
Yeah.
you're saying?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the one thing to do is to really, what do you think I'm going to say? What is the number one thing we're supposed to do?
Listen.
Exactly.
Why there's the underlying issues, right?
Exactly.
Yes,
Appreciate. Don't point
appreciate.
to the child. Don't become afraid. You all know what suicidal ideation is because believe it or not, if you are honest with yourself, you've considered it too. At least considered it. As adults, we pretend that we are exempt from that, but we're not. We all have at least considered, is it worth living anymore? Some people say, no, I don't consider it ever. Well, that's not actually true. Because if you know that you didn't consider it, you already considered it and decided that you didn't. So at some point, you have considered, is life worth living? These children or anyone who comes across a so-called suicidal ideation have reached a point in their day or in their life or in the moment of time where they're not certain that living is bringing a higher return than not living would. In other words, do they have a purpose? Do they have a mission? Do they have a function? Is there something here that's bringing them any joy or any comfort? Is there something here that they have anything to contribute to? Is there something here that's contributing to them and giving them access to a life worth living? These are the questions that need to be answered. When people aren't experiencing those things, we start thinking about the possibility that being dead might be better than being alive. And you can understand that if you use just legitimate reason and our own humanity to be curious about it. The way to cure, if you will, or turn around suicidal ideation is to absolutely understand and resonate and harmonize with the person who is expressing that so that they feel that you actually understand their experience. More than likely, what their experience, they think that they're entirely lonely, that they're in a worse place than anyone who would choose to live. But if you can share that with another person such that they get it too, now you've got a partner in crime. And in many ways, that's all you have to do. That is where tremendous healing can take place. And not just once. I'm not saying share it for just a few seconds and then give up on it. I'm saying actually be there with the person who is finding hopelessness in this world or finding no real good reason to live it when dying is an option.
How do you even get? I know this is a child can come up to a parent and say that, but what do you even recommend for a parent to get diagnosed? Because when the first thing you usually do is go to your primary care physician and they'll send you a referral to a therapist or psychologist or psychiatrist, right? And I've always this is what I mean. I'm just gonna give you my personal opinion. I always stay away from psychiatrists because in my mind they're gonna diagnose you, they're gonna medicate you. So I would prefer a psychologist over a therapist or a therapist over a psychiatrist. What would you recommend
Yeah,
diagnosing?
the issue with that is that even therapists and psychologists, when they become exhausted and what they're doing doesn't resonate with the client or the patient or the customer or whatever you want to call them, then they many of them punt it right directly to a psychiatrist. Much more of the referrals come from therapists and psychologists than they do from the general public. You see, because they do everything they can and they forget this important dogma as well. They forget that what's really here is not to cure the client of their suicidality. That isn't really what's important. What's really important is to understand and relate to and accept and, resonate with and then harmonize with and get the experience of the person that they're with. And although psychology and therapy is often built with that as a concept, some people have difficulty actually going there with other people. We all do. Like maybe if a certain patient came into my room, I would have my own issues to deal with that would make it an obstacle that I could deal with their pain and suffering. In that case, the best thing to hope for would be either for me to get over myself and to do the inner shadow work on myself so that I can relate to this client, understanding that that's a higher need, or in some cases to defer and refer to somebody else who might have a better access. What people want more than anything is to be heard for who they are. I can't say that enough. That's what all people want. 7.8 billion people on the world want to make a difference in this world while they're here, and want to do so by being heard and understood for who they are and what they represent as human beings.
Let's talk about support groups and cognitive behavior therapy. Do you currently have that in your coaching program?
I don't have, I do have support groups. I do use a group model. So if we get people together who have like minds, I find that to be when, if we can put more than one person together who is dealing with a similar issue or who has dealt with it and created different solutions, then I think having a group can be very supportive. I think the issue with cognitive behavioral therapy is some people think they actually understand what it means, as if there's some actual understanding of what automation is, what are the issues in CBT that actually make it worthwhile. So there's some people who think that they're an expert in it. Theoretically, understanding the relationship between cognitive and behavior, between our thinking and our actions, should go a long ways. The idea is applying our humanity is what's critical, whether or not we call it CBT, officially CBT, or if we call it just like, support groups of like-minded individuals or even masterminds for that matter.
How do we even? I know when I was looking for a therapist, I was looking for somebody that looks like me or somebody who is culturally diverse, right? And a lot of times you hear brown and black people, they say, well, we can't find anyone that look like us. We can't really find anyone that can relate to us or can really understand us. So they stop therapy altogether. What would you say when someone is vetting a therapist, they should, like I said, they should consider when looking for one?
Yeah. That's a great question, and thank you. Very sensitively asked as well. So I think the answer is be careful to think yourself to be entirely different than any other group out here. Remember that us humans live in one family, all of us, whatever our color is, whatever our age is, whatever our sex is, whatever our orientation is, whatever our nationalities are. There is more that is alike about all us humans than isn't. And there's no one who's exactly like you. So if I find a Caucasian therapist, it's not entirely likely that their experience of me is more aligned than with somebody of color. It's entirely possible I could find somebody of color or a woman of color or a young woman of color or a young woman of color from Nigeria who actually relates to me even better than somebody who lives in California, who's a man, who's white, and has a history of being a doctor. Those things are not maybe as important as we like to think in order to interrelate across humanity and really get what the issues are that are representative of the human condition rather than the partializing that the partializing that happens when we start demarcating ourselves as being different than other humans. So we should be very careful about that.
Thank you, sir. I was trying to get to your books before I actually have you on, but you have so many of them. And I think I'm going to start with Healing the Healer. What is that book about?
So that's actually a course.
It's a course?
That's not a book. That's a course. And you can find that one at healingthehealer.online. And that's actually a course that's built for healers, people like ourselves, people who have been committed and dedicated to making a difference in the world by healing the rest of humanity, who find out soon after getting their job or finding their occupation that it's not anything like what they thought it was going to be. So they become disenchanted with their job. Instead, there's too much paperwork, there's too much administration. They're not allowed to spread their wings. They're not allowed to share their true humanity. And they become discouraged and then just start punching the clock every day and really forgetting why they went into the field in the first place. This is such a common problem inside of the general health system. Nurses and social workers and counselors and doctors and dentists and people in a lot of fields have found that when they get to the formalized job after their schooling and training, it's not anything like they thought they were going to bring forward. Healing the Healer is geared towards those people. It's a 10-module course. It's a great course. I'm very proud of it. It's helped a lot of people. It's available at healingthehealer.online. And it's an online course, self-paced, and comes with a mastermind if you choose. So the idea is there's a live version where you get me a couple times a month, and you also get the course, and that's the Healing the Healer course.
Definitely. I have it on the list. That's the first one
Yeah.
I'm gonna go to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead to that one. That's a great one. You'll love that.
Wonderful. Any words of encouragement for anyone who is helping somebody go through any struggles relating to mental health?
Well, the biggest thing to get, I think, is more just underlining things I've already emphasized, which is number one, there might be nothing wrong with them.
Yes.
There might be nothing wrong with them.
They just want to be
Like,
heard.
they just want to be heard. There may be nothing wrong with them, even though everybody has told you, and they even think there's something wrong with them. What's really important here is that if you think there's something wrong with you, you just join the crowd of 7.8 billion of us who all think there's something wrong with us. So one of the ways to know that you're just like us is to think that you're not. We all think we're different than everybody else. We all think that. We all have that same flaw because, as they say, we compare our insides with everybody's outsides, and we see people we think act like they got it together, and we think we don't. So when we know there's something wrong with us, that's actually falling right in the middle of the pale of what it means to be a human, because each of us knows in our own hearts that there's something wrong with us. So there's nothing wrong with them. And if you can get that and really approach people with an honest level of full curiosity and wonder and interest, and, actually, when communicating, listen, not just hear, listen to what it is that they're trying to say in between their words and through their words, through their unspoken language and their creative language. Actually getting someone, what you're going to find when you're trying to help somebody is that by connecting with them, by resonating with them, by harmonizing with them, you will in fact bring absolute healing to the baseline, to the center of that relationship.
Great. That's amazing. Dr. Fred, how can people reach out to you for coaching services for a virtual consultation?
Right. So I'm super interested in having your listeners of all ages, all types, whatever that people they're up to. I have been a coach for over 40 years. And what you're going to get is somebody who takes you on as a family member, as an extension of myself. I bring my full self forward. I am not playing around in this area of harmonizing and resonating and helping people optimize their life. The best way to get a hold of me is on the site I just sent you to, which is Dr. Fred, drfred360.com. And at drfred360.com, there's a number of freebies you can get. You can get a couple of my PDFs. You can get my books downloaded for free. You can get access to my courses. You can get articles that I've written for Psychology Today and award-winning articles that I've also written, like Global Madness. And there's many things on that site, including a discovery call. And if you hit that discovery call button and you've actually got my name through this podcast, then I'm going to give you a free half-hour discovery call where we can decide whether or not whether there's a good, good relationship, a good connection between us. And if there isn't, for whatever reason, I will be certain to be able to help you by all the many network connections that I do have in the field. So my idea is that I'm willing to give that discovery call away for free for all of your listeners.
Thank you so much, Dr. Fred. I really hope what you have shared here today will resonate with our guests and our viewers and just give somebody some hope. Because I'm originally from West Africa, and I think my audience, Black and Brown people, can resonate with you because a lot of them don't want to go the medication route. So for them to even hear you speak to that, and I think they can resonate a lot with that, and we'll definitely be reaching out to you.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I've done some research about a couple countries that like Rwanda and Zimbabwe specifically, where there is approaches to this that are a little bit different than what Americans think is the number one approach. I don't know if you've ever heard of the orange picnic table. I think it's called the orange park bench. I think it might be in Zimbabwe. I'm kind of forgetting. And the idea is they park a grandmother on these picnic benches because everyone knows that when you talk to a grandmother, you get better. And there's a grandmother parked every day, a different grandmother parked on the picnic bench every day. And when you have an issue, you go over to that picnic bench and have your conversation with grandma. And that has been shown to have much better cure rates than anything that any Americans have ever put together.
That's exactly what we're doing in Africa. Therapy is the elders.
Right. Yeah, the elders is where the action is. Exactly.
Yes. Thank you so much, sir. Please hang tight. I'll come and talk to you in a minute.
Okay, good. Thank you, Jane. Really
You're
appreciate
welcome,
it.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for listening to Unfiltered Minds Podcast. If you love what you're learning on our podcast, we ask that you please join the Unfiltered Minds community by subscribing and sharing our podcast on YouTube, or you can listen on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify. Our dedicated team of ADHD coaches are committed to making a positive impact on the lives of our listeners. Through our thought-provoking podcast, we offer valuable resources, PBT training for ADHD, and a supportive community that understands the journey of mental health challenges. Also, you can visit our website at theunfilteredminds.com, where you can sign up to be a guest on our podcast, as well as sign up for our 8-week parent behavior training course on ADHD.